truth. We're about wisdom. We're about empowerment. Urban Family Talk.
We have not talked with you on the air about the passing of Justice Antonin Scalia, and we have not talked about the implications of that. We've certainly not talked on the air about the importance of the Supreme Court. And I think a lot of people kind of overlook them, because they don't understand exactly the influence that they have over the direction of our country and how they choose, whether it is liberal or conservative, how they choose to interpret the Constitution. So I was hoping that we would talk about that a little bit. But before we do that, though, something that grabbed my attention, and I've had it up on my computer here for a couple of days, and I thought, man, this would be a really great conversation to have with Abe, because I know that not only are you paying close attention to what's happening in the public school system, but you're also aware of the spiritual implication of the overreach of government to try to condition our children. So this story from the Associated Press in Pierre, South Dakota. South Dakota would be the first state, and listen to this. This is a big deal. South Dakota would be the first state in the United States to approve a law requiring transgender students to use bathrooms and locker rooms that correspond to their sex at birth. Okay? If the governor signs the bill that was passed on Tuesday by the state Senate. The Senate voted 20-15 to send the bill to the state's Republican governor. How do you say his name? Is it Dogard? Dogard?
I think it's Dogard.
Dogard. Okay, Governor Dennis Dogard, who initially responded positively to the measure, but said last week that he'd need to study it more before making a decision. I don't know what more there is to really study about it. It's just saying that whatever your gender is at birth, that's the bathroom you need to use.
Yeah, makes sense
to
me.
Or I think also written in the bill is that if that's not the case, then provide a reasonable accommodation, like meaning that you have a single bathroom, you know what I'm saying? Or you go into the teachers' facilities, but we're not going to traumatize our children who show up for an education because of your whims. The thing I found interesting about this, and I want to talk about it with you, Abe, is the use of Title IX, the anti-discrimination law in our public schools and universities and things like that, how that could be used to either shoot down this bill, or why the reason for this bill is to go against the revision to Title IX to include now kids who identify as transgender and say that they just, want to show up as they feel on any given day. Abe, help us make sense of this if you will.
I'll try my best.
Sure.
But man, this is very crazy. So
Yeah.
as you said, so Title IX, just to give a summary, the legal provisions of Title IX say that no person in the United States shall, on the basis of sex, be excluded from participation in, be denied the benefits of, or be subjected to discrimination under any education program or activity receiving financial assistance. The amendment that you're discussing is not necessarily an amendment to the law, but
How it's interpreted.
Well, how it's interpreted, but an instruction given from the executive branch of our government, headed by our president,
Yes.
to the Department of Education. You see, so it's not as if it's been made statutory, but the Department of Education, which is governed federally, has been instructed to interpret this statute to apply to include what is commonly referred to as gender discrimination.
Okay.
So,
man, I hope that people understand that that's so critical to understand what that means. Okay. That's
because
good.
elections have consequences.
Right.
We put people in office who have no regard for the biblical definition of manhood and womanhood. Then this is what we get.
Yeah.
So what you have is the same type of bully tactics. I mean, you talk about intolerance. You want to be tolerant, but unless you agree with me, then if you don't agree with me, then we're not going to tolerate your disagreement.
Right.
So the threat that is often made to educational institutions is if you do not comply with the sexual deviancy agenda, then you risk losing Title IX funding. Risk losing federal funding for your educational initiative.
Right.
So what South Dakota is attempting to establish, which should be absolute common sense.
Right.
But common sense is not too common. And you asked about the spiritual implications. The reality is when you factor God out of your reasoning capacity, then you open yourself up to all types of ridiculousness. You know, because you have no straight edge, you have no standards by
That's
which to
right.
govern yourself. So then what you actually end up doing is implementing the governance of your fleeting desire at the moment.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
And the unfortunate reality, and y'all know me, I'm just gonna lay it out there straight.
Right.
The unfortunate reality is that the chief prize of the sexual deviancy agenda is our children.
Man, okay,
And that
it
makes
bears-
sense
it
from a
bears repeating.
strategic, and if you
Yes.
look at it strategically, that makes sense.
Because you're always one step ahead with your agenda. If
Bingo.
you get the children,
Yes.
you are
That's
taking
why
your
we should be
agenda
discipling.
into the next generation with ease.
Yeah.
With
That's
ease.
right.
Yeah.
Which is why the fight is so aggressive. You would think, man, all right, come on, man. We don't want to confuse little kids. We don't, let the kids go in the bathroom in the sex they're born with. Or if you're transgender, just go in the bathroom over here by yourself.
Go in a private bathroom,
Yeah.
a one-person stall
You know,
or something. Yeah.
which begs the question, how would a child be transgendered?
Right. Man.
And then the
Man.
other part of the thing, and you have to watch verbiage because you see they carefully use sex, sexual orientation, and gender identity. Well, what would be the legal definition of gender identity? Each state would have to define it for itself, but it commonly is defined in statutory or attempted to be defined in statutory regulations as actual or perceived gender identity.
Wow.
So it doesn't matter what type of biological equipment you are structured with.
Yeah.
All that matters is how you perceive yourself.
Wow. Wow. I was talking to Jeremy Wiggins, who hosts a show on our sister network, and we were just talking about, among other things, he kind of alluded, we're talking about gender confusion. And he said something that I thought was really profound that bears repeating. He said, Miki, he said, the thing is, because I was saying how, you have all these different numbers. People say these people who are confused, that is, talk about 41 genders and there's 26 and all these different numbers. He said, the thing is, though, Miki, he said, it's either God's way or it's everything else.
That's right. There's no middle ground.
There's no limit.
There is no middle
There are
ground.
no limitations to it. Like you can't even really try to put a number on it. It's either it's man and woman. It's the way God designed it, or it's anything else. You know what I'm saying? Forget about 41. It could be a million.
Right.
You see what I'm saying? Because you don't have any
Where does it
straight
stop?
edge.
There is no straight edge. And here's the thing. And I always try to, Michael Jackson's song Man in the Mirror, I always try to reveal the devilish hand behind it all.
Come on,
Because
let's
what
do
the
that.
goal is, and you never want to evaluate these issues in a vacuum. You want to evaluate them in the individual context, but you always want to extrapolate to the wider context and seek the Lord's vision and the Lord's insight for the overarching spiritual implications.
Yes.
Here, what you have in our culture, there is an aggressive, unabated march toward androgyny.
Wow.
Androgyny is a big word that just means no distinction in
At all. Yeah.
in human sexuality, no distinction in human identification, where there is no distinction between men and women. There is not a goal to. It's not about just satisfying the discriminated or grieved against party, because that word has been used like a sword to sever our culture. When the truth is, not all discrimination is bad.
Come on.
We discriminate against murderers.
Right.
We discriminate against drug dealers. We discriminate against thieves.
Child
We
molesters.
discriminate against child
on,
molesters.
yeah.
We discriminate against all sorts of people. So it is important for our listeners to recognize discrimination is not a bad word. The question is, what is the basis of your discrimination?
Yeah.
If you shoot and kill someone unjustifiably, you deserve to be discriminated against. If you abuse a child, you deserve to be discriminated against. Okay? But this press towards androgyny, that's why you have Jaden Smiths of the world being
on.
co-opted by Louis Vuitton and Gucci to wear dresses. That's
Right,
why you have, on the flip side, Kylie Jenner being put in campaign ads with boys showing I'm strong, because they want to
Yeah.
blur the lines between manhood
Wow.
and womanhood, which, and let me throw this in there, which is why the church has to maintain its hold, because when
on.
the church allows the distinction between men and women to be blurred, you set the stage for it to be wide open for the culture.
Come on, Abe.
Okay?
Come
Because
on.
the Lord intentionally, he said he created mankind, Adam in Hebrew, in his likeness and image. In his image, he created them both,
Come on.
male
Yep.
and female. God had a
thank you, Lord.
specific plan in mind through which to convey his glorious image to the world.
Come on, Abe.
to the world. There is a beautiful plan between having men and women readily identifiable as being separate and distinct.
Right.
Truth. We're about wisdom. We're about empowerment. Urban Family Talk.